All right, welcome back to Doctrines 3, the Doctrines of Angels, Church, and End Times, as we continue our study of Eschatology, the doctrine of last things. We're going to continue our study from last week of the tribulation and the time of the tribulation with more specifics this week. And I want to start in this video with a discussion about the Antichrist. And as there is a lot to be said about the Antichrist, his identification and such like that, what I want to do is we're going to spend a little bit more time in this video. So I want to apologize right ahead of this video that this may be a little bit long. As you can see from the statement there, this information is pulled from a work done by a scholar named J.B. Hickson, who wrote an article. You can find it there on his website, notbyworks.org. So let's get into this right away. First of all, the word Antichrist. Let's look at the lexical considerations here. What does the dictionary say about the word Antichrist? Well, it comes from two words, anti and Christos. So the first word carries the thought of instead of, or a substitute, or a better way of putting it, a false Christ. The second meaning is probably the one most often thought of as being against Christ. The Antichrist would be a substitute who is against. He's the opposite of Christ. So when we come into that term, Antichristos, it's found just a few times in Scripture, and all of them are in the epistles of John. It appears twice in 1 John chapter 2, verse 18. Again, just a few verses later, John chapter 2, verse 22. Then in chapter 4, and then again in 2 John, verse 7. So let's look at some of these passages more specifically, because it seems kind of odd that such a term dealing with the end times would appear in one of the epistles of John. But here's how it's used in 1 John. In the context of 1 John chapter 2, he's talking about whether or not we reject or recognize Jesus as the Messiah. Now, throughout Jewish history, there were many false messiahs. Even during the intertestamental period, there were many people who came and claimed to be the Messiah, and of course were not. So even after Jesus came to this earth, there were several people who claimed to be Messiah who were not. And so each one of those would be an antichrist, a false Messiah. The passage here refers to many antichrists that have already been on the scene, but there is one in particular, Antichrist, the Antichrist, is coming. He actually contrasts in 1 John 2, verse 18, that there is an Antichrist, the Antichrist, but there are also many Antichrist. The spirit of Antichrist is already in the world. In the context of discussion about the identity of the personal Messiah, it is clear that the future Antichrist must be a literal individual person. All right. The reference here is to a coming personal Antichrist who serves as the climax of human rebellion against the Messiah at the end of the age. So while John refers to many antichrists who are in the world, he does refer that there will be an Antichrist, the Antichrist who will come at the end of the age. How about chapter 4, verse 3? He talks about the spirit of Antichrist is already in the earth, and that this idea of Antichrist is not just simply a single person, but that it could be many people. It's a spirit. And again, not a personal spirit, not like a demon, but rather this concept of Antichrist always permeates the earth and is already on the earth. Consider this. Satan, as we discussed in angelology, is not omniscient. He does not know the future. Satan doesn't know the hour or the day or the time of the rapture any more than when Jesus was on this earth. He said the Son of Man does not know the time or the hour. And so if Satan doesn't know when Jesus is returning, it's most likely that he's always going to have his man on earth. It's reasonable to assume that Satan has to have a man prepared or ready to function in the role of his primary agent whenever that happens. So perhaps in the 1940s, Hitler was the Antichrist. Perhaps he was, the spirit of Antichrist was already there, was already present. And so we could say throughout all of history, from the time of Christ's departure until a future rapture of the church, until the Antichrist is specifically named, it could be a lot of people. There's always at least one, if not more, people that Satan has on this earth to fill that role. So in theology, when we talk about the Antichrist, there's several terms in Scripture that refer to him. He is, and what we see him as, he is a man who will rule the world just prior to the second coming of Christ, during the period of the tribulation. He signs that peace treaty with Israel we talked about last week as the beginning of the tribulation. And then at the midpoint of the tribulation, he will be possessed by Satan and even claim that he himself is God. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verses 1 through 10 discuss about how that will happen, and that he will set himself up in the temple as God. That is the abomination which causes desolation, spoken of by Daniel and then repeated again by Jesus in Matthew chapter 24. Jesus will then destroy him when he returns at the second coming. And we see this several times throughout Scripture. We'll talk about that more in our video on the second coming. There are several words, several terms that designate the Antichrist. He's called the little horn. He's called the prince that shall come. He's called the willful king. All of these coming out of Daniel. He's called the one who makes desolate. We talked about the abomination that causes desolation. The man of sin in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. That's the term we saw in our rapture passage, that the man of sin must be revealed. He will be called a son of perdition, same passage there, or the lawless one. Daniel, both the book of Daniel and the book of Revelation just simply refer to him as the beast. And in that symbolic language, which we'll talk about here in just a minute, he's referred to as the beast who is to come, one of the beasts of the visions of Daniel. And as we see all throughout Daniel's visions, those beasts that we see, the first, second, third, and fourth beast in his first vision, but in later visions as well, always refers to a global ruler or a ruler of a great nation. And of course, in Revelation 13, he's specifically called the beast who's coming up out of the sea, as compared to the beast that comes up out of the earth. And in contrast, there, Revelation chapter 13 is talking about the Antichrist as compared to the false prophet. And many have taken that to think the idea of coming up out of the sea being the sea of peoples, the sea of, or perhaps even as you're looking out to the west of Israel, you go look out over the Mediterranean Sea, and so anyone coming from the east would be coming up out of the sea in that picturesque language. So it could be that he is from west of Palestine, which would be a western world. Of course, that's where Rome is, across the Mediterranean Sea from Israel, as compared to the man who comes from the earth, perhaps coming from Israel itself. The false prophet very well may be a Jewish rabbi, and many people believe that. All right, let's talk about some of these individually. Daniel chapter 7 says a lot about the little horn that comes up out of the great beast, or the great dragon with many horns. He is the one who destroys 3 of the 10 horns or kingdoms within the 4th world empire. The 4 world empires being the first empire being Babylon, the second being Persia, the third being Greece, and the 4th being Rome. And that these 10 kingdoms within the 4th world empire, that there would be one king who comes up out of that, defeats 3 kings, and then comes to power. We have no cognate, we have no a point of reference within anywhere in Roman history where that even remotely takes place. There's no time in which there were 10 kingdoms of the Roman Empire, and so this very likely refers to a future time when there is when there are 10 kingdoms or 10 nations or 10 groups that come together to form this new Roman Empire, the resurrected Roman Empire. And somehow, in his grasp for power, he will defeat or remove or displace 3 of those kingdoms or 3 of those rulers to set himself up as the ruler of that kingdom. He's the one who possesses the eyes of a man. This focuses on the humanity of his person. He's a human being, in contrast with the eyes of the Spirit possessed by the Lamb of Christ in Revelation chapter 5. He is a person. He's a human being. There's nothing necessarily supernatural about him. He's just going to be a man. Although at the midpoint, when he is possessed by Satan, of course, he will then become more than a man because he will be possessed by Satan. He's the one who boasts great things about himself. So he's a very boastful and arrogant person. We see this in Daniel chapter 7. He is the one who will be judged by God in burning fire. And at the end of the tribulation, he will be cast alive into the lake of fire, where even during the millennial kingdom, while Satan is bound and we are celebrating the millennial kingdom on earth for 1,000 years, the Antichrist will burn in the lake of fire prior to anyone else being cast in. He is the one who is powerful and destructive and who will crush the whole earth. He will be a world-dominant ruler, not just over a large kingdom, not just over a great kingdom, but rather he will rule the whole world in many ways. Now, that does not mean that he will have complete control over the world. There will be many who oppose him, not just Christians, but there will be many nations who oppose him. We'll talk about those when we get to our discussion about Armageddon. That he will be opposed by Egypt, he will be opposed by Russia, he will be opposed by a confederacy of Far Eastern nations, and so there will be opposition to him. There will be wars and rumors of wars that are conducted during his reign, but he will be seen as a global leader. He is one who wages war against the saints and succeeds in some measure. He will persecute and martyr many believers and many Jews during his reign. He is one who attacks the law of God and changes observances. He will change calendars. He will change feasts. He will very much try to mold the earth, mold the world into a one world government and one world religion and one world culture. And for 3.5 years, he will succeed in doing so. He is the one who is destroyed when the Son of Man receives the kingdom from the Ancient of Days in Daniel chapter 7. That at the end of his reign of 7 years, Jesus Christ himself will destroy his kingdom and will set up his own kingdom for 1,000 years instead. Daniel chapter 11 calls him the willful king. He will exalt and magnify himself above all gods and speak against the one true God. And this, of course, happens not only just in his atheism and his speak about gods, false gods, and that there is no true God, but he'll also, at the midpoint, set himself up as the one true God of the world. He will prosper for a time. He will reject the gods of his fathers. Many have taken this to think that he is perhaps Jewish or Christian, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything. It just simply means he'll reject whatever gods his fathers worshipped. This could mean that he's Muslim. It could mean that he's Christian. It could mean that he's Jewish. It could just simply mean that he's rejecting the idea of theism from those who came before him. Before we read too much into that, it says he will show no regard for women. Now, some have taken this to say that he is perhaps a homosexual. However, that does not, the wording here does not indicate that. Of course, Hebrew has many terms that talk about homosexuality, femininity, and that kind of thing. However, this just simply says that he loves power more than women, and so he's not interested in as much in women as he is in power. So perhaps that he's more of an asexual type person, where he just doesn't, he's not distracted by, or what doesn't allow himself to be distracted by, female companionship. He will honor a god of power, which is probably the god of that he will worship Satan himself. But more so than that, he'll worship the idea of power and being a powerful person. He will be a conqueror. We see that several times throughout Scripture, even in the book of Revelation, in the very first judgment, the first seal judgment, where we see the rider on the white horse, who is the Antichrist himself. He comes to conquer, and he comes conquering. He will battle against the king of the north and the king of the south. This is most likely Egypt, and perhaps either Syria, or perhaps even further north into Russia itself. Again, we're not sure at this point if this is perhaps the war that takes place as the second seal judgment, or if this is a war that takes place a little bit later on. I tend to think that this is a battle that takes place, or a war that takes place as the great war that is the second seal judgment, that red horse that comes up after the white horse in Revelation chapter 7. He's called in 2 Thessalonians the man of sin, or the man of perdition or destruction. He must be revealed before the day of the Lord arrives. He must come to position. He must come to power before Jesus can come back to the earth. We know that the restrainer must be taken out of the way. We talked about that when we talked about the rapture. He's the son of destruction or perdition. Not only will he destroy many traditions, cultures, he'll physically destroy things on this earth, but he himself ultimately pointing to his own destruction and leading many other people to destruction as well. And finally, he will set himself up as the one God of Israel. His program is currently being restrained by the restrainer. And of course, in verse 8 there, it says that he is a man of lawlessness. Not that he wants anarchy, because he wants power for himself. Instead, he views himself as above the law. Laws don't apply to him or to his administration, and so he himself is lawless because he is above the law. It will be allowed for him to be able to perform signs and false wonders. The false prophet will also be doing these things, and there will be counterfeit signs and wonders being done by him, most particularly after the midpoint of the tribulation, when he calls on people to worship him as the one true God, as he sits in the Holy of Holies and declares himself to be God. He will command that people worship him, and he will be deceptive. He will be a liar. He will deceive the nations. He will deceive many. And of course, we see that throughout this, that he is, and so in every way, we can see this as opposed to the true Christ, as compared to Jesus Christ, who is meek and mild, is not seeking power. He's a man of truth. He's a man. Jesus said, "I did not come to abolish law. I came to uphold the law and to fulfill the law." And his signs and wonders that he did were true signs, true healings, true demon casting out. We see that all throughout, that there's a serious contrast, a stark contrast between Jesus and the Antichrist. Revelation chapter 13 calls him the beast who is rising up out of the sea. We get more details about the future activity of the Antichrist from Revelation 13 than anywhere else in the Bible. So let's talk a little bit about this. First of all, it says that he has 10 horns. What does that mean, he has 10 horns? Most likely this is, again, in relationship to his kingdoms, his administration. Perhaps he comes out of a confederacy of 10 nations, or a confederacy of 10 kings, or 10 world leaders. Not sure how that works out. but that's what we normally see here. It refers back to those kingdoms of the Fourth World Empire in Daniel 7. Thus, he is identified as coming out of that revived Roman Empire. It says that he has 7 heads. Wow, I'm pretty sure this human being doesn't literally have 7 heads, but rather that he comes from Rome, being that there were 7 first of all, we notice that he takes 3 kings out of the way, and going back to Daniel, and so there's 7 there. But Rome itself was founded on 7 hills, and so many times that number 7 relating to Rome itself. But he said, but saying here they're representative of 5 fallen kingdoms, one that exists now and one that is yet to come. The 5 kings that have fallen by this point: Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Persia, Greece, the one that is now, which would be the Roman Empire, and then the one that is to come, which is, of course, the kingdom of Christ. Okay, who is the one who is, from the first century point of view, can only be Rome, and the one who is to come, either his own kingdom, the revived Roman Empire, or perhaps you can relate that to the kingdom of Jesus Christ. If you combine his empire, that's just a continuation of the Roman Empire. Either way, you still end up with 7 kingdoms here. Okay, in this way, the beast likely epitomizes the evil that exists in the kingdoms arrayed against God's people, Israel, over the centuries. Each one of those kingdoms opposed Israel specifically. Egypt, Babylon, Persia, Rome, Greece, all of these attacked Israel. All of these held Israel in contempt and subjugated Israel during their time, and his kingdom will be the same. All right, it says there that he's like a leopard, a bear, and a lion. This is very specific wording because this goes back to Daniel's vision of the 4 beasts in Daniel chapter 7, where the first beast was like a lion, being the Babylonian Empire, or more specifically, Nebuchadnezzar's empire. The bear was the Medo-Persian Empire. Then the third kingdom was like a leopard, Alexander the Great, who very speedily conquered the world like the fast leopard. So here he's what's happening here is he's representative of all of these previous 3 kingdoms, and then in that 4th kingdom of Rome. And what happens here, that actually goes all the way back to Daniel chapter 3 Daniel chapter 2 in Nebuchadnezzar's vision of vision of his statue, in which it had a gold head, the silver arms and torso, the brass belly, and the legs of iron. That the kingdom itself will be established upon one another, and so those things that marked the Babylonian Empire were then added onto with the Medo-Persian Empire, then added on to Greece, and then added on again to Rome, so that Rome epitomized all of those previous kingdoms before it, and so the final king of the Roman Empire would then also epitomize all of those things. He is the 4th world kingdom, the king sometimes discussed as the king and sometimes as kingdom, just like Nebuchadnezzar and Babylon were. There is no distinguishing between the king and the kingdom, sums up all of the characterizations of those nations that preceded him. All right, again, hang in there with me. It's getting a little long here, but we're just going to keep plowing through. He receives power and authority from the dragon himself, from Satan. Satan is the one who is the true power behind the beast. He endures a kind of death and resurrection. It says that he has what appears to be a death blow to his head, a mortal wound to the head, and then resurrects. Again, not sure if there's a real resurrection that takes place here, or if it's a false resurrection. The idea here doesn't really matter. It fools the entire world into thinking, look, he raised from the dead just like Jesus. He must be the true Christ. That's when he's able to set himself up as the Jewish God, as the God of all gods. And then he eventually receives worship from the world, setting up that image of himself, probably there in the Temple Mount area, for people to bow down and worship that image. Notice again the hearkening back to Nebuchadnezzar's image that he forced people to bow down and worship. He's arrogant. He proud, speaking boastful things about himself. He makes war for 42 months, probably a reference to the last 3.5 years of the tribulation, in which he goes out and wars against Israel and the Christians, and seeking them out in order to destroy them. He opposes the God of the Jews. He opposes the saints of God and has victory over them for a time as he goes out after them, and he rules the entire world in that time. All non-elect people worship him. Those who are not already sealed by God are sealed instead with that number 666, which we'll talk about here in a second, and they will worship him. Those who are not believers, those who are not followers of Jesus Christ, will worship him. He has an assistant, the false prophet we've talked about here, who presides over a one-world religion and points people to him for worship. You see that in 2 Thessalonians, talks about the great apostasy that needs to come up. Several passages in Revelation talk about this enigma Babylon religion that comes up. Basically, it's a conglomeration of all the world religions. It's a big ecumenical religious movement, and so is a one world religious group that the false prophet is over. He performs great signs through his assistant, through the false prophet. Again here, Revelation 13, he's deceptive. He has an image made of himself. We talk about Nebuchadnezzar, and he makes that image to speak. And he then kills the saints. He requires all people who want to buy and sell to have a mark on their foreheads and on their right hands. He controls the commerce of the world. And part of that false promise is that he wants to make all buying and trading and selling, he wants to eliminate money. He wants to make a cashless society in which the only way to buy, sell, or trade is to have the mark on their forehead or on their right hands. And here again, I don't want to get too deep into trying to say, oh, this is how it is in the time now, but we can kind of see today that makes a whole lot of sense. If you have some kind of a barcode, or you have some kind of an IR chip or something like that implanted, we do things like that with dogs. It would actually be pretty easy to take that chip that's now in your credit card and put it in your hand or put it in your forehead to be used. I don't think we need to go nearly that far with it. That's very speculative, and certainly technologies may have changed. Certainly by then, who would have thought we would have been thinking about chips in our hands and our computer chips or whatever even just 100 years ago. So again, there's no reason to believe that this even is something technological. It could just simply mean that I want a tattoo on your hand that says that you're allowed to buy, sell, or trade. So again, don't get too caught up in present circumstances when interpreting eschatology. That special number is the number 666. Let's take a short time here. I want to take some consideration of this number 666. Many have tried to identify this, or have identified this name this number as a cognate of his actual given name, as if you can add up the letters of his name and get this number 666. While this is true, Scripture does simply say, whoever has understanding can calculate this number. It is his name. However, it's not the name of someone who's living now. It's not the name of someone who's lived in the past. And any attempts at calculating a number from a person's name is really a contrivance. In other words, if you have the answer, which is 666, you can make those letters to calculate into anything to get 666. many attempts have been made to calculate names of prominent individuals, such as popes and Caesars and presidents and all that. You've probably even heard some of those. The most prominent of which is the name Nero. And I'm not going to get into it because it's not true. Because what they do is they actually translate it into Hebrew and then translate it back into Greek in order to give it numbers, and then it's not even a name that's ever been given to him. They actually spell it differently in order to get those numbers proper, and ultimately doesn't work. Because like I said before, it's really just a contrivance. You're just taking numbers and letters and trying to get to the number 666. Well, if I start with the answer, I can contrive any calculation to get to that final number. Instead, there's the word name Nero there. Instead, this number is actually quite symbolic, not necessarily a contrivance of or a cognate of his given name, but rather think about the symbolism that's involved here, because all throughout the book of Revelation, there's lots of symbolism in numbers. In fact, biblical numerology is actually a kind of a side interest of mine. I don't know that I'd ever be able to teach a class on biblical numerology, but you can see the symbolic nature of numbers all throughout the book of Revelation, very important to the book of Revelation. And so if we think about those numbers symbolically, in fact, the passage itself gives us the credence to do so. It says it's the number of a man. What does it mean to be the number of a man? Well, the number 7 in Scripture we see it as God's number. It's a number of completeness or perfection. 7 days in a week, 7 spirits, the 7 lampstands, the 7 many different sevens throughout the book of Revelation, throughout Scripture, that identify completeness or perfection. 6 is obviously the number just before 7, so it is imperfection. It is just short of perfection. But also remember this, that man was created on the 6th day. And so we see that. Then why is it tripled? Why is it 666? Well, pretty simply put, when you triple repeat something in Scripture, particularly in the Hebrew language, it means a superlative. We see that in Isaiah 6. We see holy, holy, holy. That means the most holy thing that can possibly be. And so this means the uttermost. It means the most it could be. So simply put, the Antichrist is simply utterly short of perfection. He completely falls short of being God. He's a man. He is a fallen man, and he is as fallen can be. So if that maybe helps a little better, rather than trying to calculate the number, let's look at it symbolically instead. Getting back to the beast, the Antichrist here, where does he come from? What's his nationality? The Antichrist comes out of the last or fourth generation, or last or fourth kingdom, the pagan world empire, in the same way that prior leaders had emerged in Daniel chapter 7 there. This could mean that it is European rather than Middle Eastern. Makes a lot of sense. As coming up out of the water could simply mean that he's coming up out of the Mediterranean Sea, so he's a Western person as compared to Middle Eastern or Far Eastern. The Antichrist is an associate with the false prophet who heads up the world religion. He himself could be Jewish. We don't know that either. That's kind of he's a parallel with Antiochus Epiphanes. All throughout Daniel 8, all throughout even Daniel 11, when we talk about the Antiochus Epiphanes, he's a forerunner of, or the term there is that he is the word just fell out of my head. He is a type of Antichrist. Antiochus Epiphanes is, and so that he's a Gentile world leader. Daniel 11 indicates that he's not Jewish. The term Elohim in Daniel 11 that says that he will not worship the gods of his father. It's plural, probably gods rather than the God of his fathers. So in conclusion, let me talk a little bit about this more specifically here. we do know that he comes up out of a resurrected Roman Empire. That means that he could come up literally out of anything. He could come up out of Rome itself, the city. He could be a Roman Catholic. It could be Pope. Could be that he comes up out of Italy itself, as in Mussolini did. In fact, Mussolini named his empire, named his fascist state of Italy, the New Rome. Rome moved to Constantinople, which was a Greek empire, the Byzantine Empire. So he could be coming up out of Macedonia or Greece, which is where Constantinople is. Constantinople was taken over by the Turks, the Ottoman Turks, and so he could be Turkish. The Constantinople was just before it was sacked. The Eastern Orthodox Church moved to Moscow, moved to Russia. So he could be coming up out of Russia. We have the resurrected Holy Roman Empire under Charlemagne in the 800s. Could be that he comes up out of Germany or Austria or one of those other Germanic nations in that way. Could be that he comes up out of the Carolingian Empire itself, which is actually France. Could be that he comes up out of the Papal States. Could be that it could be anywhere from any of the Romantic languages. All those language groups like Italian and Spanish and French that all speak Romance languages. Or simply could just be anything that identifies itself as a world empire. Could be a European Union. It could be even the United States itself. Ultimately, and one final one, it could even be Nova Roma, which is a town in Brazil. Again, a Latin country established by Europe itself, by Portugal. So you have all of these things. He literally could come out of just about anywhere from the West. I think the only thing we could say is he's probably not African, and he's probably not Far Eastern. That pretty much is the only things that we can say about him. In conclusion, and again, I do apologize for the length of this video. I wanted to get it all in one so that because there really weren't any natural breaks in this video. The Antichrist is a future personal individual who will be the central world figure during the period of time known as Daniel's 70th week, the tribulation. He is an instrument of Satan in the final battle between good and evil, eventually opposing Jesus Christ himself, setting himself up as God, and eventually opposing Jesus Christ himself in the battle of Armageddon. He will be empowered by Satan. He will glorify himself as God. He will oppose Christ. He will slaughter the Jews and Jewish and Gentile believers in his time. He is most likely a Gentile ruler who arises out of a revived Roman Western Empire and attempts to control the world and its religious expressions. That's all we have for the Antichrist, and the next couple of videos we'll be looking at the believers of the tribulation time and Jesus Christ's return itself.